afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend the event today and joining this session. Joining me is Luki. He is the Chief Career Catalyst at Focus Inspired. He's a former management consultant and undergrad campus recruiting lead at one of the Big Four firms. He's a lifelong learner with a goal to elevate education and weave mentorship into the fabric of society, starting by making Toronto the mentorship capital of the world. So thank you, Luki, for taking the time today to present. I hope everyone enjoys the presentation, and I'll try to hopefully figure out the audio by the end of his presentation, and he'll be able to answer your questions at the end. All right, whenever you're ready to go.
So I'm guessing that thumbs up was the handover to me. So thanks everyone for joining and joining me in the session of Don't Let School Get in the Way of Education. So for those that don't know who I am, my name is Luki Danukarjanto. Luki is fine. Don't worry too much about the last name. I started my career in computer science. I ended up doing over a decade in management consulting with one of the Big Four. And I used to also be their undergrad campus recruiter while I was there for a period of time as well. But now I'm a career coach. I like to say that I found my purpose helping others find theirs. And I do some business advisory work with a lot of youth entrepreneurship startups. And I'm a dad of 2 kids for those of you who are in that boat. But most of you are students, so you may or may not be at that life stage yet. But I thought I'd share a little bit of insights. This is my second time in one of the Toronto Jobs sessions, so thanks for having me back. But a little bit on grades in school and why employers don't really focus too much on grades and what you can do about that. So a couple of things that we'll cover is grades and what they are and why are they actually important, right? And the other things are why aren't they important? So, and then we'll give you some action items on what to do and how you can do it. So I'd love to get a little feeling of who you are. So if you want to type in the chat kind of information about your school, your program, maybe your dream career, and that'll help contextualize. So if we're more on the kind of the business side, the tech side, or healthcare, or humanities, or whatever, then that might contextualize some of my discussion later on. So if you want to pepper the chat with some information, I'd love to get to know you a little bit as well. So as we fill kind of the screen, and hopefully I can get one or two people to kind of type in some information about them. But I want you to ponder a question. So let's imagine that you were in your career and you're now hiring someone, right? You're now in the place where you can take on someone to join your team, and you have a couple of choices that you have. So would you rather hire someone who has read every single book on and took every single course on whatever your domain is? So if you're in accounting and law and technology, in healthcare, in medicine, in English and writing or whatever it is. So someone who's basically read every book and taken every single course on it, or would you rather hire someone who has been working in that domain, whatever it is, for the past year, but hasn't taken any formal courses? Right. So this is a curiosity where a lot of folks will generally gravitate to option B, and if folks again are willing to populate in the chat just an A or B on what you'd prefer, that would help me understand whether you agree with what I'm coming from. Most people that I talk to will want the working folks, right? Because there is a difference between academically knowing something versus actually experientially knowing it, right? So for any of you who have ever gone swimming and been in a pool, like you could read all the books that you want on swimming, but that's not going to necessarily help you. For those of you who have ever done their driving license, right? You've read the driver's handbook and you took a look at all the different rules of the road, but the first time you're behind the actual wheel of an actual car, it's a totally different experience. And having to keep track of all the mirrors and shoulder checks and all the different knobs and dials and everything there, and then your one foot on the gas and on the pedal, totally different experience. So as you think about your schooling, whatever career path that you want to be doing, so let's say you're going on the business side and you're supposed to be doing some accounting work, well, what they teach you in school may not necessarily be exactly what you expect to be doing in the real world. So just something to be aware of, that even though when you're in school, people prize those marks and taking all the courses and all those certifications, in the real world, most companies don't necessarily have the same sort of appreciation for that. So, but let's get on the same page for a minute, right? So what are grades? right? So grades really are just a mark that's indicating the quality of a student's work. So you can take a look at whatever dictionary definitions. I pulled this from Oxford Languages, which is contrasted with school, right? Which is an institution that which instruction is given in a particular discipline, right? So whatever program that you're taking, you're in a school. Now I contrast that with education, where that's the process of receiving and giving systematic instruction. And I actually add a little bit to that, where I also encourage it to be demonstrating ability, right? And part of that is highlighted by a quote by Mark Twain, which says, "Don't let school get in the way of education." So just be mindful of that. So even though class is great and it's useful and you're getting a lot of good insights and experience, it doesn't necessarily stop there, right? So if you think about grades and what they symbolize, right? They're supposed to symbolize your ability to meet expectations, right? Do you know the material? Do you know the information? Do you know how to study? Do you know how to answer the assignment? Do you know how to do the exam? Whatever it is, it's supposed to demonstrate your ability to meet expectations. Now, unfortunately, it's dependent on the assessments used, right? So there's a lot of theory happening on the multiple intelligences and things like that, where not everybody can actually take an assessment and it really identify whether they're smart or not. And you'll probably know folks that are academically gifted, but out in the real world, they don't do so well. And those that do really well out in the real world, yet they don't have great marks on their side, right? Keep in mind that it's a point in time, right? So just because you were smart in grade 8 doesn't mean you're smart in grade 12, which means doesn't necessarily mean you're smart in fourth year university, right? So it is an indicator, and sometimes it could be a bad day, whether you were sick on a particular afternoon or weekend or evening, wherever it is. It could be just you're feeling bad that day and you weren't performing at your highest potential, right? Sometimes it's subjective and biased. Like I said, with the multiple intelligences, the typical assessment system will bias people who are very kind of logical, very verbal, and linguistic and logical in that sense, right? For those that are more kind of artistic based or physically gifted or more on the creative side, it doesn't necessarily have the same sort of assessment, right? And one unfortunate side effect about grades is it actually promotes lowballing, right? So if you're curious about what that is, if you've ever been or if you've ever taken a bird course, if you know what those are, even it's those courses that you kind of take to increase your GPA. Well, that's kind of lowballing. You pick a course that's specifically easy and set the bar low and have a low expectation so that you can excel and exceed, right? So if you've ever done that, then a lot of people will take the courses that will allow them to get better marks instead of doing it for the actual learning of it. So ideally, what you would want to do is actually take the difficult courses so that you can get the most learning and the most experience out of that, right? And if you've ever invested in anything in terms of like stocks or mutual funds or whatever, you might have heard that past performance does not guarantee future returns, because a lot of folks who have studied in the past, they would have done a whole bunch of work and then conveniently forget it the next day or the next week, right? I know I've been guilty of that, and maybe you have too, right? So just be aware that grades are useful in some aspects, but they're not in other respects as well, right? But just as a warning, there are some career paths, some jobs that grades actually do matter. So if you're planning to do an advanced degree, if you're planning to go into academia, take your master's or PhD or your research, grades are important, right? Because they have to filter through that system in order to get that. There are some other kind of prestige type paths where it's like investment banking or management consulting or even accounting and law to some respects, where there's so many people, smart people getting into those fields that in order to weed them out, all the various candidates, they do require some sort of grades. Some sort of reasonably high grades in order for you to progress on that path. So even though I say that grades are not necessarily important, right, depending on which area you're going into, so these are ones where you may want to put a special emphasis on the grades, right? But for the most part, probably 80% of the other areas that are out there, the grades are probably the least of your worries, and you want to focus a little bit more about experience and what you can actually do with it, right? So going back to the analogy of reading all the books but never actually doing it, right? If you can think of someone who, let's say, is going to fix your car, right? If you've had someone who is a mechanic for a year fixing your car versus someone who's read every single manual on cars, you probably want to think twice about who's doing it. The person with the actual experience probably will do a better job in that, right? So keeping in mind that that knowledge, that the understanding that you get from school is actually not power. Like the conventional wisdom is that knowledge is power, but it's only potential power. It's really only power when you turn it into action, right? And what I encourage folks to do is to take your education, take your schooling for the learning, like how to do things, right? Especially when you have those exams and you get whatever, an 80%, that's a good mark. But what about the 20% that you got wrong, right? How can you improve? How can you get better? Few people, and myself included, didn't spend enough time taking a look at that. And when you do that, you really can showcase your skills to kind of constantly improve yourself and get better and better. And then that actually builds very solid foundations for you later on, right? Especially for those of you who are early in your careers, you really want to build those foundations so that you can grow and grow and grow, right? And when they're more solid, imagine building a house. Let's imagine that the first floor was only 80% complete from a foundation perspective, right? And then you continue building the next floor, and that one's 80% complete. The third floor is 80% complete. So it's 80% on 80% on 80%. And then and no wonder that your marks are starting to dwindle as you go through time because they're built on rocky foundations. So take the time to learn and go back and find what that delta is. What aren't you getting? What maybe it's a simple concept. Maybe someone can explain to you in a different way that's outside kind of the typical testing regime for you to get a little better, right? And be aware that you can make mistakes. Now, the challenge is the school system doesn't really allow for that, right? When you get a mark, it's kind of that black mark on you, right? So what you want to do is take a lot of sample exams or get other tests from other areas and compare and contrast so that you can practice and get better and better. And don't be so worried about making mistakes. Be more worried about not understanding the material, not being able to apply the material in real life, right? So now that you know that grades are not the one and only thing, like, well, what can you do about it? How can I get experience? So for those of you who are on here, you're probably not part of a co-op program, right? An internship program, right? Because there are work integrated programs where part of your education is actually in the in a work placement, right? So if you're in that case, then what you need to do is prioritize the time, right? Whether it be taking the summers off or finding some weekend work or evening work in order to get some jobs, make it non-negotiable, right? So taking that time to go back and relearn the material, go back and start a project to do something, or somehow allocate the time in order to do this. Maybe it's even networking and building relationships. You want to do that, right? And going back to my point about the foundations, you want to learn for mastery, right? So if you have 80%, go back and understand that 20. Go back and to whatever time frame or whatever portion that you need in order to do that. And when you build on those solid foundations, actually learning gets easier and easier, right? Find mentors, right? So if you're a younger year student, find a third or fourth year student, find an alumni, find someone whose job that you want, right? And ask them about the challenges and the problems that you're facing, and hopefully they can solve them so that you can kind of upgrade your problems, right? So you're not dealing with the kind of the little stuff that you were dealing with in the past, you're dealing with the bigger stuff that they've kind of advised you and coached you on as well, right? Ideally, if you can build some habits, right? So for those of you who are good at sleeping early, right? And actually starting your exams assignments early, right? For those of you who eat well and exercise, right? So your physical health can help with that too. For those of you who have kind of study buddies and other people that can pull you along and improve, then those are all great habits that will carry on with you later on in life, where you learn to build relationships as you connect with other people, help have other people to hold you accountable and all that sort of stuff, right? And sometimes all you need to do is have a conversation with your parents or your family, right? And I often am connected with folks where the pressures and the expectations that are put on them are so stressful and weigh so much on them that they almost seem like they are going to burst, right? So I've had a lot of conversations, and I've probably been there at myself. So oftentimes, if you can learn to have those conversations with parents and family, that can help a lot in terms of the pressures of the grades, where, well, the grade is less important than me being able to demonstrate that I can do the work, right? So if you want to go get an experience, I mentioned that co-op and internships are a great place to do so, right? So hopefully you were able to get into one of those types of programs where it's kind of built into the curriculum. So often the difference between a co-op and an internship is a co-op is kind of 4-month, 8-month, 12, or sometimes 16-month term where it's paid, right? Internships are sometimes paid, but oftentimes they're not. And usually it takes the place of a course. So instead of working for 37 and a half or 40 hours a week, you might only work for 4 hours, right? Or maybe just one day a week to get some experience. But that's obviously better than zero or not having worked at all, right? There are more programs that are having work integrated learning, where you might interact with an employer and basically do a project for them, do some real world assessments or whatever it is, accounting and this and that, and you want to volunteer and do those personal projects as well. You can freelance, and basically what I want you to do is allocate time to hone your craft. And basically, if you can take the job descriptions and line the experience to the roles that you want, then you'll be in much better shape as well. And try to think about what's holding you back, right? And I find that the excuse of I've never done it before is not a good one, because there's so many things you've never done before. Like you've never walked, you never tried, driven or swam or typed or whatever, but you figured out and learned how to do it, right? So don't let that hold you back. Sometimes it's time, money, or connections, right? You can always prioritize the time. You can always make more money if you want. And connections, well, that starts with connecting with people and building those relationships, right? And oftentimes it's a fear, a failure, a fear of judgment, and for some people it's actually a fear of success, right? So if something's holding you back, take some time to kind of recover from it, and hopefully you'll be able to overcome yourself from that area. And then build an action plan. So allocate time. I encourage folks to create non-negotiable time. An hour a day, a couple of hours a week, a whole couple of days a week, where you are volunteering, doing personal projects, part-time jobs, freelancing, whatever it is, right? And how do you solidify what you learn? How do you take that academic stuff from class and actually put into practice? Thinking about who you should know, right? So sometimes the quote is not what you know, but who you know, right? So go and find people whose job you want and connect with them, right? And maybe volunteer with them and help them with some of the issues or the challenges that they have, right? Build better habits, as I mentioned, right? Try to wake up early, start assignments earlier as well, and then build a great group of people around you and more better habits, right? And then if you are chatting with your parents, when will you chat with them? When will you be prepared? When will you be able to have that honest conversation? So I think I went a little bit over because of the technical difficulties, so apologies for that. But we covered, again, grades, why they aren't as important as you may think, and what to do about it. And for folks that are on LinkedIn, I would love for you to connect. I'm going to paste my information in the chat. Please connect. I have a lot of useful information on YouTube as well if you want to check that out. And I'll probably stick around on the networking side and be there as well. So thanks so much, everyone, for sharing. I'll be happy to take any questions if folks are curious and interested. And for those that actually want, I'm actually building an app. It's called a Career Buddy. Call it a career coach in your pocket. Call it Luki in your pocket. It's starting with the job search, and it's going to give you a kind of a very step-by-step, almost a wizard type format, where it's like step 1, go sign up for job alert. Step 2, go get a template. Step 3, and all that sort of stuff. Keep going and doing all of that sort of stuff. So I would love if folks are able to, if you have any questions, feel free to pop in the chat, or if you can want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so as well. But I think that is my time here. So I really appreciate everyone coming in and sticking around. And yeah, hopefully I'll hear from all of you. And if there's no questions, then hopefully you will enjoy yourself at the next session. So thanks everyone for joining and sticking around. And apologies for the technical difficulties. I still can't hear anybody. So Sandra, if you are saying anything, I'm not sure. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll probably see you in another session. No, my audio is still not working.
Okay, so since
Okay,
he can't
yes,
hear
Sandra,
me,
please.
I'm going to put the question that I have. There's a couple questions that I'm going to ask.
Oh, and I still can't hear you.
And I'm going to put it
You
in
may
the
have
chat.
to type your chat. I'll just leave this on.
Let's see if you can see the chat here.
I can see the chat, yeah.
Okay, good. So when
I can see the chat. Questions. I didn't see any questions in the chat. Did I miss it? I have a question for you. I am putting the question in. Can you see the chat? Those are the messages that I see. Can you see the chat? Oh, I was interning full-time in a law school, and so my grades were average. Is there a way I can explain that to employers when I apply for a job? So I think law is one of those fields I mentioned. It's kind of one of those prestige ones where the marks actually weigh in on it. So the best way to do that is actually not to apply and actually to be networking, right? So if I were you, I would probably be connecting with every kind of paralegal, legal assistant, every lawyer that you can find on LinkedIn, on any networking groups or whatever, and get them to kind of build, take a bet on you, right? So oftentimes, again, grades are only one part of it, but you want to kind of let them understand, well, why would I want to take a bet on you versus this other person who has a 4.0 and they're also like the president of this club and that club and whatever, right? And if you can describe, well, I am a harder worker, you know, I don't know, tax law inside and out, whatever. And even though your grades were average, it was because you took this other like non-related course that that brought down your average. I mean, that could be something there, because there's all sorts of reasons why your grades might not be good. Where maybe the core ones that apply to your program are really good, but the other ones aren't so much. So that's something that Shahab, I'd encourage you to do. Does that kind of answer your question? And yeah, Sandra, your question, when you refer to the 20%, how can students go back and understand what was missing in that 20%? So when I'm taking a look at that, it's usually for either exams or assignments, right? So you go back to your exams, and unfortunately, some places, they do not return the exams, right? Because they're unfortunately kind of the, let's call them, well, they're lazy professors, right? They want to reuse the exams year over year and year over year, so they don't want to return it, right? They just give you a mark. But hopefully the better professors are the ones that return it, right? So you can actually take a look at it, and anything you got an X, anything you lost a mark, right? Those are things that you want to shore up and say, okay, why did I miss that? Or what could I do next time to find that, right? Because especially if you apply that into your career, right? You want to be able to go back and actually look at those areas to know where to find that. So I recognize this problem and I need to look at these five things. Maybe you build a little checklist for yourself, right? For a particular type of problem, make sure you satisfy and do these other things that are there as well, right? So going back and doing that, and sometimes you can continue back even farther, where going back to that mastery learning, like if you struggled with whatever math or science or whatever, it's often not because you don't understand the material right now. It's because you didn't understand a specific concept in, let's say, grade 7, right? And just by tweaking that and like, oh, now I get it, then it kind of reinforces it and kind of builds up your understanding for later on. So yeah, going back for that missing 20% is taking a look at those assignments, and that's often a testing technique, right? So when you do those practice exams, which ones do you get and you got them right? Which ones are you struggling with? And those are the ones you often focus on, right? So hopefully that answers that question, Sandra. And then can you discuss some networking tips for students to help them get more work-related experience. So yeah, I mean, myself, if you recall my slide, my background is in computer science, right? So I am, well, I used to be a shy introvert, right? That stereotypical geeky kid in the corner. That was me. But now I consider myself an outgoing introvert, right? Because I actually still am an introvert, right? And many people actually misunderstand the definition, where an introvert means you get your energy from a smaller group of people, sometimes by yourself, right? So actually, for most people who are introverts, they do well. Like in a one-on-one situation, they're fine, right? When it starts to get 2-on-1, 3-on-1, about 4 or 5-on-1, then I start to kind of pull back, and I'm a little more reserved and don't contribute to the conversation much. But for those, especially if you have friends, I mean, you can network and connect. So the tips would be to basically improve, right, and practice, right. Get over kind of the fear of rejection or those awkward silences or all of that. The story that I usually tell is when I was in school, I would go to a study cube. So study cubes are kind of those desks with 3 walls on the side, right? You get a little bit of privacy. So I would go to class, I'd go to a study cube, class, study cube, class, study cube, maybe some lunch, and then class, and then I'd go home, right? And I did that for my first year, for my second year, and I did it for my third year. And then I had what I call my WTF moment, where I went like, what the? This is such a pathetic life. Like, what am I doing? I have, like, I don't know anybody. I literally had 2 friends in all of university, right? I was not social at all. So for whatever reason, at that point, I decided to have a conversation with the person beside me. And that conversation, it sucked. It was horrible. It was the most awkward conversation you can probably think of. But I found a quote that I now live by: I never lose, I either win or I learn, right? So it would have been a loss, but I don't lose. Definitely not a win. It was an awkward conversation. So what did I learn, right? You break the ice first, right? And go into a conversation. And the next conversation was better. Like, it wasn't good, but it was better and better and better and better. And now, like, I teach workshops on networking, right? And that's based on all my failures, right? So like I said in one of the slides, like, upgrade your problems, right? Don't make the mistakes I made, like, learn from them, and so that you can make bigger mistakes than me, or like not have to deal with all the little ones that I had to deal with, right? So a lot of it is practice, making the time, right? Start with a classmate. You know, that person that used to sit beside you, or whatever, that you kind of know, but you don't really? Well, get to know them a little more. Virtually, right? It's a little bit more challenging because you can't kind of bump into someone. Well, just say, hey, want to jump? Do you mind jumping on a Zoom call, a Teams meeting, a Google Meet, or whatever it is, and just have a conversation? And I can't guarantee that it won't be awkward, because it probably will be a little bit, but go back and learn. So as you have the conversation, reflect and say, okay, what went well and what could I do better? And then do both of those things the next time. And the next one will be better, right? Because if you are, let's put a number, if you're 1 out of 10 on networking, you can't expect to be an 8 out of 10 tomorrow, right? You'll go be a 1 out of 10, then you'll be a 2, and then a 3, and then a 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And if you have all these tips and tricks, then you'll get a lot better a lot quicker, right? So and just be nice to yourself and forgive yourself, right? You don't need to beat yourself up, because some people are better at networking naturally than others. So anyway, this is something I get really passionate about. So hopefully that was a good enough explanation in order to network in the related field. So
sorry everyone for the technical.
Intern remotely with a US-based company during my master's degree in Canada. Does that have a good weightage in the Canadian job market? So you have a degree in Canada and you work for a US firm. So yes and no. So having work experience obviously helps in the Canadian market, but there is this strange phenomenon that I find, that people heavily weight Canadian experience, right? They automatically assume that if you work in Canada, that you can integrate and understand expectations. US is probably the next tier down. Maybe like the UK or other English-speaking countries in the Commonwealth, like Australia and stuff like that. But apart from maybe those three, so US, UK, and Australia, then Canada still has the highest weightage, right? So it'll help you more than having work experience in some of the Asian or other European countries, but it'll probably be marginal. So yeah, it's better than nothing. And same sort of thing. I encourage you to network a little bit more to get that and showcase kind of how that work experience relates to a company and a law firm, or well, I don't know. You didn't say a law firm. The other person said law firm. Sorry, for the appropriate company in Canada, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, another question, Yang. Would recruiters look having good grades in hands of classes differently, or would they look at the same as the theory marks? So again, it all depends on the role, right? So the roles that I find weight grades are things like accounting, law, like investment banking, management consulting. Obviously, you need good grades to get into like med school and stuff like that. But if you think about the typical process, usually there's some sort of cutoff, right? So I was in management consulting, and we would have like 1,000 applicants for any given term or any given intake, right? So we would probably be only hiring like 100 of them, right? Even if, right? We'd probably hire 50 for that particular cycle. So we have to get that from that 1,000 down to a manageable number, which is probably like twice the number of applicants, right? So if we wanted 50, we'd probably interview about 100, right? So I have to find any excuse to get rid of all those. And one of the easiest ones to do is GPA, right? So they might filter. So at any given time, it might be a 3-point something, right? A 3.2, 3.5, 3.7, depending on how many people applied, right? So that would be where the grades are weighted. For most other companies, right? Apart from those areas, very few recruiters actually even look at your transcript. They prioritize your resume, right? And they look at it. They might take a look at your cover letter. They probably look at your LinkedIn, right? So those are kind of the 3 documents that they'll look. And then maybe if there's 2 people that are pretty close, then they'll look at your transcript, right? And because 2 people have similar experiences, has an internship here or whatever, then that would be what they would select. And if you don't have like volunteer, extracurriculars or something like that, then that's kind of the only thing that they really look like. So Yang, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but at the end of the day, it is theoretical. For more technical areas, they might weight it a little bit higher, but for others, they would be a little bit more challenging. So Yang, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but feel free to clarify if there's something else. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, and I think, sorry for the technical difficulties, yeah, on my side. And again, I encourage everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn. Sandra, I don't know if you want to do an outro, or it was already past that. I'm just catching up on the chat.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your questions. That was really great. So sorry again for the technical difficulties, but if you do have any more questions, like Luki mentioned, you can contact him on LinkedIn or connect with him on LinkedIn. You can head over to the networking session, if you'd like. It's just on the left-hand side of your screen. It's a little box that says networking. And we also have sessions coming up also from 3 to 3:30 and a panel starting at 3:30. So you can also join those booths over there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Cool. Well, thanks, Sandra. I have no idea what you said, but hopefully it's something good. And thanks for everyone that stuck around. And hopefully I'll see you in maybe in the networking or maybe in one of the other sessions. So thanks, everyone.